Hi, welcome to my latest video blog. My name is Rosenberg, and I am the author of The Human Magnet Syndrome. I'm also writing my second book, The Codependency Cure: Breaking Free from Narcissists. For today's video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about my observe, don't absorb technique, or ODA. I've discussed this technique at least twice on YouTube, and I will be writing about it in detail in my second book. To use the observe, don't absorb technique, it's helpful to come up with what I call defensive fantasy scenarios. As I said before, through my quote of George Bernard Shaw, if you wrestle with pigs, you're always going to get dirty. And besides that, pigs like to wrestle. So, if you're going to avoid being pulled into the analogous wrestling ring of your narcissist, you have to understand how to defend yourself. You have to learn how to disconnect or disassociate. This form of disassociation is what I call healthy disassociation. You consciously decide when you go into it, and then you consciously decide when you go out of it. You are in control of this process. And to keep from absorbing or letting your emotional, manipulative narcissist to get you upset, you have to learn to protect yourself. And this form of disassociation requires these defensive fantasy scenarios. Once I explain some of these to you, it might seem silly, but trust me, they work. For example, the first one, the Kevlar or Teflon suit. So for these fantasy scenarios to work, you have to actually imagine in your mind, while you are disconnected or disassociated, that you are within this fantasy scenario. So in this one, I want you to imagine as the narcissist is trying to pull you into his ring or try to get you upset. I want you to imagine this, that you are wearing a suit made of Teflon or a suit made of Kevlar, because we know that Teflon, if you cook, everything slides right off it. And we know that that Kevlar suits protect police and other people from being killed from firearms. They stop a bullet. So let's go with the Teflon. So as you're in that moment, and the narcissist is screaming at you, yelling at you, throwing guilt trips at you, trying to get a reaction, and you are observing them, you're disconnected, and you're not absorbing them, you're not taking in the toxic influences of that disconnection and getting upset. You are wearing Teflon, and every time they say something to you, you can imagine that insult, that guilt trip. It just kind of falls right off you. If you stay connected to that fantasy scenario, you'll find that your mind is on your Teflon suit and watching how the insults or the manipulations just slip right off. Trust me, try it. So I want you to imagine that your emotional manipulator, the narcissist, has a syringe and it's filled with this drug, what we know as a roofie, and they want to stick you with it, because once they stick you with it, you will lose control of yourself, you will become immediately sedated, and you will fall victim to anything that they want. So in your observe mode, you are watching this person find an opportunity to inject you with this drug. And so as the observer, not the absorber, because you don't want to absorb this metaphorical drug, you are watching the person try to inject you. So this is the fantasy scenario. Look at those insults, those guilt trips, those comments as attempts to stick you with the syringe. And as you see that, or you picture that in your mind, you can stay disconnected, you can stay in your observe mode, and you can stay safe. And you'll find that you won't get stuck. The third scenario is perhaps one of my favorites. It's pretending you are a Vulcan or you're Mr. Spock. Now this works especially well for Trekkies, but you don't have to be a fan of Star Trek for this to work. Imagine that you are Mr. Spock. Mr. Spock is all logical. He does not have feelings, and his feelings, if any, are connected to logic. So if you're Mr. Spock and someone, your emotional manipulator or your narcissist, is trying to get you mad, trying to evoke a response, trying to pull you into the ring, you can't get mad because you don't process emotions.
All right. There's something wrong about a man who never smiles, whose conversation never varies from the routine of the job, and who won't talk about his background.
I see.
Spock. I mean that it's odd for a non-Vulcan.
Mr. Spock would not get mad. In fact, Mr. Spock cannot absorb because he does not react to feelings. So imagine, if you may, so imagine in this defensive fantasy role, imagine that you're Mr. Spock while the narcissist is trying to manipulate you. Again, this is all to be kept inside. You do not talk about it. It is a way to keep yourself focused in observing and not absorbing.
You mean they should have respected us? Of course. Mr. Spock, respect is a rational process. Did it ever occur to you they might react emotionally? With anger?
Doctor, I'm not responsible for their unpredictability.
The fourth one is you are a research assistant. For many of us who were once psych majors, for those therapists who are watching this video, this one's an easier one. Because if you are a research assistant and you're there to collect data, you know that you don't interact with the subject of the research. Because if you do, you confound the results of the data and you screw up the research. So if you can imagine this defensive fantasy scenario, you are a research assistant and you have been trained in narcissistic personality disorder, or for that matter, borderline or antisocial personality disorder. You have been trained about that, and you're watching your narcissist, and your job is to watch and collect data. So in this fantasy scenario, I want you to imagine you are collecting data. Of course, please don't pick up a pad of paper and write down notes, because that will only aggravate the narcissist and make it worse. But you are watching him behave as a narcissist that you were trained about in school. And you are logging this imaginary data on your imaginary notepad. You're watching him try to get you mad, and you're taking note of the traits and the characteristics of a narcissistic personality disorder or the other disorders as I mentioned. This is a perfect defensive strategy to reinforce the observe don't absorb technique, because it focuses you on the observation element of ODA. If you are an observer and you know that you cannot react, you stay the observer. Because of course you don't want to get your professor mad at you and start getting mad at the narcissistic subject, because now you ruined the research. Your job is to watch and collect data. What you find in this exercise is you find moments of sense of humor, moments where you see the ridiculousness of the narcissist. Because as someone who is exercising or effectively utilizing ODA, you are watching the narcissist be a narcissist trying to get you mad. And you can't get mad because you're just a research assistant collecting data. So in closing, I recommend that you watch my Observe Don't Absorb video on YouTube, but use this video as a companion to it. This video talks to you about these defensive fantasy scenarios that you can use to maintain ODA's impact and effectiveness. Well, thank you for watching. Be well. And if you want to know more about me, please go to my website, Human Magnet Syndrome. Or if you're interested in purchasing any of my trainings or my book, you can go to advancedclinicaltrainers.com. Thank you, and be well.